worthy president has asked that we start with a 4-week test. So we'll do that when we start today. So if we could all kind of recite in concert, please. Number 1, is it the truth? Number 2, is it fair to all concerned? Number 3, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And number 4, is it beneficial to all concerned? Do we have any guests today? Diane?
My guest is Lydia Hill, my neighbor and good friend.
Welcome, Lydia. How about any visiting Rotary? Oh, Lydia, I'm sorry.
Yes, all right. This is my good friend, Bob Bryson, who's been with us several times.
Hey, Matt?
Go ahead, Bob.
I'm my guest, Ann Ward, my wife. She said because she's never heard Steve Kirschner's stories.
Welcome, man. Pat.
My guest is my son, Will. Felix.
Steve draws a big
Y'all need to get out more.
How about any visiting Rotarians today?
Oh, wait, one more.
I'm sorry, Cass. Sorry.
My wife, Linda Curl.
I would like to announce today is the 248th birthday of the United States Marine Corps.
I didn't see any hands go up for visiting Rotarians yet. How about any anniversaries this week? Birthdays? Anybody want to admit they got a birthday? All right. I'm going to be short and sweet today because we got to give you time because we want to hear all the good Carolina gossip they're going to get us. I'm going to start with some of the trivia that I love, that I read, and some of the things that come in my profession from the stock exchange, etc. And some of these things are fascinating and they get from time to time. Cybercrime. Cybercrime is now costing the global economy $1 billion an hour. Americans today are more scared about their online safety than burglary, carjacking, or assault. If cybercrime damage were a state, it would be the world's 3rd largest economy behind the United States and China. Crazy stuff. Some of these things I don't want people getting. Cruise ships in Europe emit more toxic sulfur than 1 billion cars. Australia is wider than the moon. Australia is wider than the moon. Man. Water extraction from aquifers in Mexico for avocado farming are now causing minor earthquakes in Mexico. It takes up to 6 liters of water to make 1 liter of beer. We're in trouble. More than 5 billion gallons of raw sewage is spilled every year in the U.S. That's enough to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Let's go. Every year, the waste from Thanksgiving generates the same carbon footprint as 1 million cars driving from LA to Florida, and enough water to supply New York City for 100 days. I'm almost through with this, folks. Air pollution in New York is so bad right now that smoking a half a pack of cigarettes is healthier than breathing the air in New York. The U.S. US now has over 1 billion square feet of empty office space, which is the equivalent of 48,000 empty floors that would be tall enough to reach to the International Space Station. Where do they find this foolishness? With that, I'm going to turn it over to the worthy leader.
Yes, thank you for some odd but illuminating information there, Laura. Today is a special day for me. I'm a proud United States Air Force veteran, and today is the day we recognize a veteran day. So I'd like all the veterans in the room to stand up, please, and be recognized at this moment. Also, you might have noticed this week for you people that do email, we sent out a notification for our upcoming holiday party next month. It is December the 14th at the Carolina Club. Please come join us in the festivities. There will be dessert this year. We promise, God. We'll be where you at. There will be dessert this year. Come out and enjoy the fun with us. We are trying to put together a watch party for the Clemson football game next Saturday at the Silver Spot Theater. The game's at 3:30. It's an away game. More to follow on that. It'll be kind of like a pop-up thing. But at the theater, we have our own little private theater room with access to food, beverage, big screen TV, Tar Heels, and your friends. Can't get much better than that, can it? One more quick thing. After today's meeting with my board, please stay here. We're going to have a quick meeting on a proposed member. And on that note, also, we're going to hold any new membership for the first of the year so we can get a handle on catering, holiday party, and a couple of things not there now. And there's me working trying to keep food here for everyone. And we want to start the new year with a big bang and maybe bring in several members. I can't think of a better way to start the new year than with new members. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jim Heather to introduce a familiar but beloved face.
Two quick things, generational. What Carolina basketball player holds the all-time shooting consecutive free throw shooting record? Number of free throws in a row.
Jeff Lebo.
Lebo is right. Who got that?
I thought it was yours.
Well, you guys got that. So here's what's interesting. That was 1989. I walked in today thinking that it was indeed York Larisi, who hit, I think, 22 in a row in Dixie Classic in what I think was 1960. And I thought, nobody will ever beat that. Well, Lebo hit 41. That was in 1989. What's interesting about that is that more than half of the members of this club were around in 1989. A whole lot of them were just being born around that time. Then the other question, everybody ought to be able to get this one. You shout it out in a hurry. Who holds the Carolina all-time scoring record? Who? Career Hansbrough. Oh, man, that was not that long ago. So now, Steve, I don't know. All I know is that we're going to give you a better grade today than we gave them who is reporting on what's going on with the Tar Heels. Please welcome Steve Kirshner.
Does this work? Yeah. I'm like lean this low. There you go. Better? Can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay. So a couple things, because this is what I do. The York Larisi reference is spot on because he still holds the record for most free throws without a miss in a game. He was 21 for 21 against Duke, so that still is the record. Caleb Love, who's going to be playing tonight in Cameron Indoor Stadium for Arizona. He actually was one shy of Lebo's record. He carried over into early last season. He ended up with 40. And the reference of Bobby Lewis for the scoring trivia question that Jim had is also right on, because Bobby holds the record, the single game record, which he set in 1965, and that record still holds, 49 points against Florida State. Tim, can you hear me? You're pointing.
No, I'm sorry. Tell them where to find that.
Okay. All right. I thought you were already saying, get off. So I didn't know this was trivia night, so I also had some trivia questions because I brought some. This is my baby, the Carolina Basketball Record Book, and then I brought a couple of football and basketball media guides because I figured if I was boring, I'd at least leave you with something. So, quick trivia questions first to holler out. You can take your pick of the media guides or the record book. First one is Hubert, as you know, grew up in Burke, Virginia. He went to high school, and it was a pretty good high school athletically. Mia Hamm played there at the same time, as did Olympic gold medalist and Carolina hurdler Alan Johnson. So the trivia question part is, Hubert played wide receiver. What future Tar Heel quarterback was his high school quarterback?
Todd Burnett.
Yes! Whoa, there you go. Todd Burnett. Second question is, so Omarion Hampton, our sophomore tailback, has rushed for 100 yards in each of the last 4 games, which is pretty high up on the list. I dropped my note. It's actually already, there's only 5 guys who've done that in 5 games or more. He's already got the 6th longest streak of that. So if he does it tomorrow night against Duke, that would be the longest stretch, 5 games, since Gio Bernard did it in 2012. So the question is, who holds the Carolina record for most consecutive 100-yard games with 8? Who said Don McCauley? Whoever said Don McCauley first, you get that. So the gentlemen come see me afterwards, and you can pick which one of these you would like. So I told Jim, because this is my 3rd or 4th time speaking to y'all, which is a huge. I can't believe anybody would want to hear me talk that often, but I thank you for asking me back. This is one of my 2 favorite times of year, professionally and personally. November and March are, to me, if you work in college athletics, the best times of year, because November is when the fall sports are playing in their championships and the winter sports are starting, and March is when the winter sports are championship time and the spring sports are full go. And I like being busy, and we're really busy right now. Obviously, football, the strong start, the 2 disappointing losses, and a little bit bounce back last week against an overmatched team, and now we've got Duke tomorrow night. And I've been doing the credentials at football games. I think Rick Brewer turned that over to me sometime in the late 90s, maybe 2000. So I've been issuing credentials and putting the media in their seats for about 23, 24 years. And we have more scouts. This isn't hyperbole, this is a fact. We have more NFL teams and more NFL scouts coming to tomorrow night's game than I would say probably in the last 8 to 10 years combined for all games in the months of November. Wow. I mean that, I'm not making that up. Because typically Daryl Moody, who was an assistant coach, offensive coordinator under Mac and Mac's 1.0. Daryl's still on his staff as an advisor. Daryl and I were talking, he's sort of the liaison with the NFL scouts. And Daryl also was an NFL scout after he finished his coaching career with the Bills and the Chargers too. And he commented on the same thing. He said, Kirsch, because I sent him the list. He goes, Kirsch, I can't believe how many NFL scouts are coming. And that's not just Drake. That's Cedric Gray, that's Tez also. But hardly, the scouts usually come on site in September. And the September games, and maybe a little bit into early October, we get a lot of scouts. But tomorrow night, there are 13 NFL teams that are going to be at the game with a total of 19 scouts. Wow. And usually they don't travel in pairs. But the Denver Broncos are bringing 3 scouts, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, New York Giants, and somebody else are bring on the Cleveland Browns. Like I said, they're all bringing multiple scouts. So, and I'm not telling you anything that it's on the seating chart tomorrow. So I'm sure some media person is going to take a picture and tweet out how many scouts are here. But that's an unusually high number of scouts, which should tell you that there are a couple, 2, 3, 4 guys on our team at least that those teams really want to see and evaluate. And the cost of making a mistake on an NFL high draft pick is so damaging to a team and to the people that make those decisions, the GMs and player personnel directors, that Daryl told me that's why you're seeing more teams send multiple people, because they want to see, they want to put multiple sets of eyes on people. So that's, you know, we've got obviously the men's basketball team, the women's basketball team, everybody's going now with the winter sports. You know, right now, as we speak, the field hockey team is playing in the NCAA first round. My daughter's at Northwestern as a field hockey player. Her team started their game 14 minutes ago. I'm looking, I'm checking how Northwestern's doing too. So, but I was just in Scotland with our men's and women's golf teams, which, you know, a lot of people in my profession complain about how hard the job is and how overworked and all we are. There's a lot of hours and all that, and you miss time. But when you work in college athletics, you also get to do things like you go to Scotland on the university's dime, and taxpayers' dime. Thank you for sending me to Scotland. But it was just a fantastic week in Scotland with the men's and women's golf teams. And if you don't get tired of me talking or answering your questions about Carolina football and basketball, I'll be glad to tell you about my trip to Scotland. Or the Eagles concert last night, which was also amazing, over in Raleigh. And that was probably the highest average age I've ever been to an event in the RBC Center, but it was a great event. So obviously with basketball, the transfers, I think the last time that I spoke to you was in March, when I think the 3rd or 4th Carolina current player transferred. I think I said something about 2 people transfers, and don't worry, because that's in the middle. There were several people going, 3, it's now, no, it's 4. And it ended up being 7. And we got 5 in, and 7 out, 5 in. And I put a note in our media notes, I added up, and the number of points coming in, I think, is around 1,300, right? I can't remember, 1,300 coming in, and it was about 600 something going out, and most of those were Caleb's. But, you know, it's weird. People ask me, you know, I guess you don't want those guys to do well. I know them as people. I want all those kids. I want Caleb to do well. I hope he does great tonight. But I want him to do well. I want those kids. You know, they're good kids. Dontrez Styles, you know, kids like that, you want to see them succeed. It's different. It's different than when I went to college. It's different the first 20 years of my 35-year career at UNC. You kids leave for different reasons. And I won't say the names of which players, but there are at least 2 or 3 of the players that transferred out that they didn't want to leave. Their family members wanted them to leave, but the kids themselves didn't want to. And when you see a young person walk out of the coach's office and they're crying because it's been made clear to them that they don't have a choice, they're leaving. So people are quick to jump on Hubert or the staff or whichever staff, not just men's basketball, but whichever. It's different. It's so easy now. We've made it so easy for kids to transfer. And the combination of NIL and transferring, it almost is, why wouldn't you consider transferring if you don't play a whole lot? And that's, you know, Omari and Hampton, I mean, people say, well, you know, NIL is going to have to come through, you know, to keep Omari and Hampton and players like that. That's happening all over the country right now. And I think that's kind of a disservice I think it's a disservice for fans. I think it's a disservice for college athletics, but it is reality that every year, it's year to year. And I go back to 1991. Remember Clifford Rozier? Oh, yeah. Right? Clifford Rozier from Bradenton, Florida. We had a great recruiting class. Montross, Phelps, Sullivan, Reese, and Rozier. And Cliffy was probably the highest rated of all of them. And every single time that he came out of a game his freshman year, I sat there at the scores table keeping stats, and I looked at Cliffy to see how his facial reaction, you know, and he rolled his eyes at Coach Smith, or he looked in the stands, and I said, oh God, he's going to transfer. You know. And I just, for 30 years, I panicked every time I thought some kid might transfer. And now I don't know who's going to be on next year's team. I have no idea who's going to be on the 24, 25 Tar Heels, because that's the college world we live in right now. And so much has happened in college athletics just since I was here in March with conference expansion and the courts. And you know, if you don't think this, if every college administrator is watching this case with what just happened with the class action suit and the possibility of billions of dollars, I mean, that's got every college administrator trying to figure out what would happen if that case goes in that direction. What's going on with Michigan and the Big Ten and sign stealing, all it's just, I mean, we don't stay out of the news, that's for sure. So there's a lot going on. I want to talk about what y'all want to talk about, so please fire away. The Duke game. Well, do y'all think Riley Leonard's out? I don't know. You know, Duke's quarterback is fantastic, Riley Leonard, and you know, they've said he's out for a long time, and you know, when they tried out there, I'm pretty confident that Mack and his staff are preparing as though Riley Leonard's going to play. And if he doesn't play, they'll have a plan for that too. But I'd prepare that you don't know if he's going to be out or not. You have to assume that he's going to play. So either way, they're really good. This is not your Duke football team of 20 years ago, whatever. Coach Elko can really coach. They run the ball. They're physical. When I was over there last year for the game, it was really noticeable how physical they were, more so than previous Duke teams. I just thought they hit you. There were just times before, I think, where they got out athleted and they got out talented, and that is absolutely not the case with their football program now. So, you know, and I think it's interesting that I like that this stretch, we saw when the schedule came out in January or February, it comes out later and later every year, as you know. When the schedule came out and everybody looked and said, oh, okay, it finishes with Duke Clemson State. The good thing about that, it was going to be a hard 3 games to finish, but the good thing was it did have an out-of-conference game, Campbell going in. And I do think that sometimes when you lose a game, you want to go back right the next week and try and fix it. I do think after the 2 straight losses, it was good to have a game. Everybody played, everybody felt good. I don't think everybody was feeling good after the first quarter when they had 109 yards and it was 7-7, but as that game went on, it got some people some playing time. It got Drake off the field in the 3rd quarter. So I think the idea that it was kind of okay, those 2 losses, let's flush them. We have everybody feel good game in the last 3 quarters, in particular with Campbell. So my understanding is they've had a good week this week, and that's not my fault.
What are the big signs on the sidelines at 10, 11, and 20? Is that to distract the other team from the real signs? And the other question is, what network executive is deciding what time the games are?
So the ESPN works with the ACC office, the conference office, and they have a pecking order who gets first, whether ESPN, and they have a pecking order within, ESPN has its own pecking order. Like there's an order inside ESPN because the 7:30 primetime game gets priority over the 3:30 game, which gets priority over the noon game, and then ACC Network kind of picks up what's after those, and the CW picks up after those. So it's the combination of the programming people at ESPN and the conference. What I think is, I think a couple things. Y'all, I'd love to hear y'all reaction. I think number one, we were given too many night games this year. I like night games. I love a nice night game at Kenan Stadium. Now I'm in the press box, so it doesn't matter if it's raining, I'm going to be the same. But I like night games, but I like them in September when it's like 106 at noon. But to me, and again, I grew up in Connecticut where the leaves started turning in the 2nd week of September. And I miss fall, I love fall. And it seems like, to me, a Saturday afternoon in Chapel Hill at Kenan Stadium is about one of the most beautiful places you could be. So the fact that we played consecutive night games in October at Kenan, I thought that was a problem. And I would say I would almost use the word mistake, but it's not a mistake because we didn't choose it. You're told this is when you play. And then the other is, I think it's a problem in college athletics that we don't tell the fans what time the game is until 6 days before.
Yeah, it's hard to plan.
Because it's hard to play. Because a football game is an event, right? You bring your families, you bring out of town guests. People, you're making dinner plans, you're making whatever plans, you know, what time you're gonna run the 5K with Bubba and all that stuff. And you don't know until Monday before. And Willie Scroggs, our great lacrosse coach and games operations director, would sit in staff meetings with Dickie and me, and he'd say, we do everything we can do to make it hard on fans to come to the game, right? And some of it is out of our control. Most of it is out of the department's control. So when are the game times, and where the university lets us have parking, and ticket prices to pay for salaries and growing staffs and everything else. But to me, the one thing I wish we pushed back on more is letting the conference and the TV partner pick so many games 6 days. Because this is, I think, like the third time in the last 4 weeks that we didn't know until 6 days before. And I don't think that's good. I don't think it's good for our fans. I don't think it's good for our team, because when it's not good for our fans, it's not good for your team. And I think that's a problem.
The better the team, the longer they wait.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're, believe me, if you're not good, in years when we weren't good, we knew we were going to be at noon. And we used to kid about it, and I'm not kidding about it. Duke tomorrow night is a really good team, but we used to kid back, you know, in the 90s and early 2000s, you know, even the people at Duke said, you know, JP was the Duke television network because they played at noon every game. Well, the better you are, Jim's right, the later you play and the longer it takes for them to decide which games you can play.
Jim Delaney, I asked Jim Delaney a couple of years ago when he was still commissioner of the Big Ten. I said, you know, and he was down here for a spring event. And I said, do you know what time Ohio State and Michigan are going to play next season? And he said, yeah, they're going to play. I know exactly when they're going to play. And I said, how come you know when they're going to play next year and we don't know anything? And he said, well, because you're a basketball conference and the whole basketball schedule is built around the Duke Carolina basketball game, but you're not around your football. Now, I don't know if that's still true.
Well, I think if I were the commissioner of a league that had Ohio State and Michigan in it, I'd probably know historically when they're going to play. And if I were the commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference, I'd probably know that the Duke Carolina game is going to be a primetime game on the last Saturday or Sunday in March, or the first Saturday or Sunday in March. I mean, there was one school wanted to do away with Carolina and Duke playing home and home in basketball because they didn't think it was fair.
Yeah.
That idea didn't go very far. Same. Some people say, well, why do Miami and Florida State get to play every year? That's too marquee of a game. They shouldn't have to. They should have to play us every year. Well, because it's Miami and Florida State. People want to see that. And the people that want to see that also are the people at the networks who put the money into the contract. And if you tell them that you're not going to play Carolina Duke home and home every year in basketball, guess what you just did to your television contract? And so, yeah, with Michigan and Ohio State's track record in football, I think it's pretty safe to say that whatever time the Big Ten and whatever Fox, their partner, wants to play that game, if it's the noon game as Fox's bit, it's going to be at noon. And wherever I was last year for Thanksgiving, where were we? Portland, Oregon, I watched, it came on at 9 a.m. because I knew it was the noon game. So it is, you want to say, well, everything's fair, right? The lowest ranked team in the preseason ACC basketball poll is going to get the same number of TV opportunities as Duke, Carolina, Miami, the top three. No, they're not. They didn't earn it the previous year, or maybe they didn't earn it the previous 10 or 15 years historically, because that's what the TV contracts are built on. Dickie, am I wrong on that?
No, yeah.
Okay.
A question about football. You look at the first 5 games of the year, and we had a pretty good defense. Everything was running pretty well. So the last 2 games before Campbell, we blew up on defense. Is it because of the caliber of the teams we were playing before versus those 2 teams, which I didn't think were caliber at the time, but they've improved a lot? And isn't the last 2 games kind of a precursor for what we could expect in the next 3 games? Or what adjustments do you think they've made on defense since those 2 games?
I knew I was going to get that one. And I can, as God is my witness, tell you, I have no idea. I'm not in the
So you have
football.
an opinion on it.
Yeah, no, I'll give you my opinion.
Okay, good.
I think in the Georgia Tech game, I think they tried to protect the corners, and they rolled help to the corners, and then left the middle of the field somewhat exposed to the run game. And I only say that because Mac and Gene said that after the game about they were picking on our corners early on. Now they were advancing the ball, but they weren't scoring. But I think from what I hear them say, that there was some concern about the corners, so let's give them some help, and then they hit us up the middle. I think that the hardest thing to do in sports is try and figure out what college kids are going to do from week to week. And I always go back to what Max said 30 years ago when he first came here. He always talked about Switzer and his 1 year working for Barry Switzer at Oklahoma. And Switzer taught him, you're only going to get these kids up at their maximum level for 4 or 5 games a week. So do I think that at 6-0, they came into the Virginia game and the spread's 21.5 or 22.5? I don't care how many times coaches stand. I mean, Mac talked about the cheese and the poison cheese and the rats and all that. And I don't know, did that plant thought in the kid's head of, hey, it's trying to figure them out is impossible. I don't think we came out. Now, I was in Scotland with golf and I listened to it, and it was 1 a.m. in the morning in Scotland, and I'm listening on the app, and I could tell in Jones Angell and Brian Simmons' voice that we were in trouble in the first quarter. Drake was missing passes high. He didn't look 100% healthy. I think McCollum dropped more balls in one game than he did in his career. You could tell it was something off. And it wasn't the biggest crowd, and there wasn't a whole lot of energy. And I don't think you take 100 college kids and you tell them you're 21.5-point favorites, and then you go tell them to play as hard as you did that game as you did at Pitt when it was a toss-up game. I don't think they do it. And I think the worst feeling, and I've felt this when we've gotten beat by Hampton in men's basketball, or we played Belmont. Well, I think Belmont beat us here back about 10 years ago. And the worst feeling is when you're sitting in the middle of the game and you're going, oh my God, why are we're not playing well at all? And you're looking up and you're going, we're behind. No, we're still behind. Or you score and then you go up 10 on Virginia. And then you settle again. Okay, well, we took their shot, right? We took their shot. It's third quarter. We're up 10. We're good. And then they go down and score in 3 plays. And I've talked to Anson about this. I've talked to Coach Williams about this. And I said, do you sense when your teams are panicking on the court or in a huddle? And Coach Williams told me one time, he said, you can almost feel it in a huddle. When you're talking to your kids, and maybe they're down, they've given up a 10-0 run or something, and they're down early. He says, you can almost see the look in their face like, okay, we didn't expect this. We didn't figure out this was going to happen. Now what do we do? And he said that was one of the hardest, or one of the most, that's when he said he got his paycheck. Because he said the idea of how to calm down an 18 or 19-year-old to believe in what they're doing, what you taught them. He goes, because it just kind of cascades down the bench. that when one kid sees it, and then all of a sudden the kids on the bench are going, "Oh my God, can you believe we're down 10 to hold cross or whatever?" And he goes, it just builds. And he goes, and you can't correct it. You can't stop everything to say, all right, it's the middle of the first half. We're going to go back in the locker room and just settle things down. You got to do it on the fly. And the Georgia Tech game, damn, that was the damnedest thing. Because we gave up no points in the first quarter, no points in the third quarter. Now they only had the ball for about 6 plays in the third quarter, but it just couldn't. They didn't stop it. And I don't think Mac was too happy that they didn't. I mean, you know, there's when things are going on like that, and you're making suggestions through the headset, and you're watching Georgia Tech run for 240 yards in a quarter, it's a very helpless feeling. Sure.
This may not hold up close scrutiny, but in looking at those games, the defense can substitute anytime it wants. But if you're running your speed up offense and going in like 3 seconds ago, you cannot substitute in and out, and that keeps us from being able to use our depth.
Well, offensive, ask Southern Cal. Southern, you know what I'm talking about? Southern Cal played Utah. And Utah figured out very quickly they were going to slow down Southern Cal's defensive substitution offensive. So they would trot out a defensive player, and literally, this is how the guy did it. And the refs can't, as long as the guy's moving towards the ball, they waited and they waited and they waited. And Southern Cal got to the point where they only had I think it was 4 seconds before the refs backed away and said, okay, you can put the ball in play, and they ended up having to call a timeout. So teams have figured out how to manipulate the clock and the substitutions to get guys. Virginia was brilliant at not allowing us to, they completely controlled, they had 38 minutes with the balls. And if I'm on the other sideline, and I got Drake May and Tez Walker and Omarion Hampton on the other sideline, do you want them to have the ball for 30 minutes a game, or do you want them to have the ball for 20 minutes a game? So they took advantage of that, and you can manipulate that on either side of the ball by the substitution patterns.
Concession prices, they're out of control. Who sets that? Why are we paying $6 and so forth?
What happened to how was Scotland?
Just asking. No, seriously, who sets these prices? Because I asked Lady the other day, I said, y'all don't want people to buy this stuff, do you?
I think we set them with our concessions partner.
$6.36 for a Coke.
Yeah, I parked at the RBC Center last night for a concert. It was $40.
I know, it's ridiculous, guys.
It's hard. Again, we make it hard going to a live sporting event. And it's not just us, it's all over the country.
A drinks $14 at the canteen stadium back.
I agree with you.
Out of control.
Noted.
Don't go to them. Got TV.
Obviously, we've all watched Drake, and he's awesome. Projected 1 or 2 pick. What's that like at practice when you're really up close compared to the last 30 years of watching quarterbacks?
So I'm the wrong guy to ask because I haven't been to a football practice all year. Not my thing. I can tell you that the players, even the basketball players like Drake, the players have said that he's so low-key in terms of the stardom effect, and he's kept them involved in the whole NIL situation. That those guys note that. And what I've heard from my colleagues in the SAD office who work with football on a daily basis say the players run through a wall for him because he's just a regular guy. And if you knew Bo, if you knew Luke, if you knew his dad, you wouldn't expect anything else. I mean, Mark May was an NFL caliber quarterback. Those of you remember before he blew, I'll get you up. Before he flew out his shoulder, Mark May was a pro quarterback. Yeah, absolutely. He was our first 400-yard guy in a game. And he gets that the way Drake deals with his teammates and the way they respect him and don't feel like he's big time among them because of prestige or awards or the NIL money is because of the way he was raised. And is absolutely to his family, and they're all that way. I mean, Luke May hit one of the 2 most memorable shots in Carolina basketball history, right?
Yeah.
And he just is the most regular person you would ever. I mean, I would like carry a sign around. I hit the shot to beat Kentucky. And it's just not the way they're family. So I think because of that, that's why the kids in the huddle believe him.
Yeah, I met Mark in high school. I was at went to Gus Purcell quarterback school near Charlotte. He was one of my instructors, and he was awesome.
Bob?
You go to basketball practices?
Yes.
Who are going to be the biggest contributors this year in basketball?
So, basketball. And I say this, and I don't want the players, if they watch this video, I don't know if we have like a superstar on the men's basketball team. I mean, Armando is broken or on the list of every record we have for a big guy. He's probably the biggest star we have, but I really like the makeup of the team, but we're also 1-0. It's still early, but I like what they bring to the group. Harrison Ingram can do a little of everything. I think he and Cormac Ryan both, you think of it this way, the 5 guys we had starting against Radford, and we'll probably start Sunday against Lehigh, those 5 starters have started 421 college games.
Wow. Just not.
And I mean, Cormac is 25 years old. So you've got kids, they're going to be playing against like college freshmen who are 17 or 18 years old. I think you got it. I think you nailed it. I wasn't smart enough to figure it out. Maybe you should keep going. What do you think about the concession prices at Keene? Too damn high.
Too damn high.
Harrison, I think he needs to be a better free throw shooter because he's in the mid-60s, and I think with his size and the way we play, I think he's going to get a lot to the free throw line. So I think he needs to knock in a little higher percentage than his first 2 years, and even the start the other night. But number one, it's a good group to be around. Sometimes the transfers, it's hard to tell, but they've been practicing since July. I mean, think about it. College basketball, it used to be, you couldn't touch a ball practically until October 15th. Sometimes it was even November 1st to get it, first practice, right? Well, now the NCAA allows practices in July. So they've been practicing for, what, 4 months already. They're so ready to play somebody else. Hubert did a Zoom today with the TV announcers for Sunday's game right before I walked over here, or came over here. And he was telling Malcolm Huckabee, the analyst, he said, what I really like about this team is, he goes, I don't remember a team that I was on, either as a player, an assistant coach, or head coach, where they just seem to enjoy each other's company as easily as these guys do. They accepted, we had 7 returning players, 4 scholarship players plus 3 walk-ons. And then we have brought in 7 new players. Now we have a very small roster this year. We only have 14 guys. Usually we have 17 or 18. So we have the 7 returners and the 7 newcomers. And what Hubert was saying to Malcolm this morning is, there wasn't, like, we didn't have to, like, go do a rafting, thing, let's do a kumbaya bonding exercise. They just came in and they got it. And again, I think it ties back to what I said earlier, that transfers in and out is just kind of, to these kids, it's like getting candy on Halloween. It's just routine. It's not as big a deal. You know, before, I think guys would come in and they'd have to like, oh, I got to prove that I know what I'm doing. I got to prove that I can play at this level. I got to get to know so-and-so because I got to show them I'm a good guy. You know, when you have half your team is new and 3 of the 7 returning are walk-ons, I mean, Cormac Ryan, he's the guy that kicked Puff in the head last year. Nobody cared. You know, he was playing for Notre Dame. It was a hard play. Nobody, I mean, I think, how are they going to react to? He's the guy that got thrown out. Nobody cared. That was something that happened in the game. Ingram can really play. Withers is as athletic a kid.
Yeah.
You know, I think trying to figure out where Withers plays, like can he play some at the 5? He certainly can play the 4. He can play the 3. Cormac can really shoot it, and Cormac is from New York, and I'm from Connecticut, so I can say that. But he's got a little bit of New York in him, and that's good. This team needed that. And he's older, and he's been at 3 schools, been at 3 great schools. I'd like to have a kid. He went to Stanford, Notre Dame, and North Carolina. That's pretty good, right? And he played for Jared Haas. He got recruited by Jared, so you know he's a good kid. He went to Notre Dame and played for Mike Bryce, so you know he's a good kid and plays hard. And the kids, I mean, Armando talked about that. You know, he got the question at ACC Media Day about, you know, who's the leader, and he said, well, Cormac doesn't take crap from anybody. I mean, and just the way he says it, it's not. He just says, this is what we're going to do. Follow me. Let's go. And RJ is tired of getting overlooked. You know, I think he's going to have a really good year because, you know, he could come back next year. He's got the 5th year because of the COVID year. And I don't know what he's leaning towards or what he's going to do, but he could. But RJ is the epitome of someone who feels like he has something to prove. People don't think he's a point guard. He wasn't on the Cousy list to start the year last year. And they don't think he's tall enough and he can't defend well enough. So I do think RJ is on that, I've got to show somebody, you know, he's got a decision to make after this year. What is he going to do? And I think, well, what are you going to do is going to be based on how well did you do. You know, the other line that Hubert had this morning, which I thought was really good to the TV folks, was that Armando is out of, well, maybe I'll come back next year. This is it. This is the 5th year. And he's sort of seen almost the highest of highs, right? Came within seconds of the highest of highs, but he's also seen the bottom tier too. I mean, his freshman year, 2019-20, you know, he flamed out the first round of his sophomore year against Wisconsin. And last year, obviously, was a disappointing year, 21 season, but a disappointing year. So he's seen the whole spectrum of being a Carolina basketball player. And you don't have any more, well, maybe next year I'll come back. This is it. So, and he's one that, Armando's really cool. Like, I'll tell him after a game, hey, you broke this record. And the first thing he says to me, he goes, yeah, but I did it in 4 years, and Lenny Rosen didn't. He gets that. And you know, I'm not kidding. I told him the other day, he said something about, after the Radford game, he goes, Kirsch, I heard I was 1 shy of Hansbrough for the offensive rebound record. I said, yeah, I said, but you know, he did it in 4 years. and he answered, and he goes, yeah, but I heard I did it in less games. So this morning when I was typing up the notes for Sunday, I have it on page 1. He did it in less games. So, but he's not a record. One thing I'm trying to figure out is we have all these criteria that Mr. Bedore put together, no, that Coach Smith put together for how you get up in the rafters, and I'm really trying to, Armando, that's an interesting one, because you know, right now he's got to be a first-team All-America or an ACC Player of the Year. Those are 2 of the top ways to get on, but to me, I think if you're the school's all-time leading rebounder and a 2 or 3-time All-ACC guy, so I'm telling you this now that I could see an adjustment to the criteria at some point. But I'm hoping that he gets there by being a first-team. Actually, I'm hoping that he gets it by being the MVP of a national championship team. That would be the best way, right? Y'all know the story about how that came up? So back in 1994, Coach Smith, have I ever told you this? Back in 1994, Coach Smith got with Rick Brewer, my predecessor as the SID, and he said, At the time, they just had 6 or 7 jerseys in the rafters. It was just the National Players of the Year, just the people who had retired jerseys, mostly being National Player of the Year. And Coach Smith wanted to honor more people. So he put together a list, Coach Smith did, and he listed out about 25 or 30 guys, and he told Rick, he said, these are the guys that belong in the rafters. Find a reason to do it. I'm serious. That's exactly what he did. So Rick put together this list, and if he got to a guy that didn't fit first team player, ACC Player of the Year, or first team All-America, he said, but he was an Olympic gold medalist. Check. He was the Final Four MVP. Check. So when Coach Williams got here, he just assumed that Donald Williams and Wayne Ellington were in the rafters because the Final Four MVPs, the way Coach Smith did Final Four MVPs, was George Lynch was the MVP of the 1993 National Championship team. Not the guy who was selected in New Orleans, which was Donald Williams, because Donald had 25 points in both games. But George was the MVP of the team that won the national championship. And I always call that the George Lynch rule. That's how Coach Smith made sure that George was in the rafters. So Coach Williams said, what do you mean, Wayne Ellington? He goes, put that in. I said, well, you have to get the athletic director's permission on that. So I think he called Dickie and said, Dickie, what do you think? Yeah, okay, we're going to do that. Right, Dickie? So that's how Wayne Ellington, so that's how you might see Armando. Armando might be.
It was easier with Coach Smith.
Yeah.
We're not going to let you off the hook, Steve, without getting you to comment on conference expansion, conference contraction, what Florida State's up to. It's bizarre.
So here's my answer to that. If you heard me talk at the Chapel Sports Club a couple weeks ago, forgive me because I'm going to say the same thing. I grew up a Boston Red Sox fan. I worked for their minor league franchise from age 10 right through college, 12 years. And we'd go to Fenway all the time. I don't care if the Red Sox win the American League East. I care if they win the World Series.
That's right.
I grew up, when I came here, the ACC tournament was the biggest event to me. I thought being part of the ACC was special. I still think being part of the ACC is special. But times have changed, and my attitude on this has changed. I spent about 3 mornings in a row in Hawaii in 2012 or 13 with Bubba on 6 a.m. 5-hour difference. 6 a.m. conference calls about Maryland was going to leave and the ACC was going to dissolve, and oh my God, what are we going to do? And I have many sleepless nights about, oh my God, the ACC is going to dissolve. I don't know what's going to happen to the ACC. The grant of rights thing seems pretty strong, or else teams probably would have already left this year, right? So I don't know where that's going over the next 12 or 13 years, that's still going. But I know this. The University of North Carolina is going to be in a good conference. It's going to be in a great conference. Whether it's wherever it is, it doesn't matter. Because of you people and the University of North Carolina and Chapel Hill and the brand and the women's soccer team and everything else that's been built up over the last century of Carolina athletics in the University of North Carolina. I have 2 requirements for criteria for conferences. One, I want to be in a conference that gives us a chance to win national championships. And I say that because when I first came here, I think more of an emphasis was placed on winning the conference championship. And I think Carolina and Duke men's basketball ruined that for everybody. And I say that in all sincerity, I'm not being glib. I think Carolina and Duke men's basketball ruined because if we go 30-0 in the regular season and we sweep we're 20-0 in conference play, and we're the #1 seed in the ACC tournament, and we win easily, and we cut down the nets in Greensboro, and then we go lose in the national championship game, y'all are pissed off. Because we didn't win the national championship. Because we've been to 21 Final Fours and 12 national championship games, we've won 6 NCAA tournament titles, and that's the standard we have here. And that's the standard they have in Durham. It may not be the standard they have at other schools, but it is the one here, so the emphasis is so much on what you do in national championship play. Our men's golf team, which is one of the best men's golf teams in the country, I work with them on a daily basis, right? They won 5 tournaments last year. They finished first in stroke play at the NCAA championships. They got to the semifinals of match play at the NCAA championships. They have 4 guys who are All-Americans. They have guys that are playing in PGA tournaments. Our worst tournament last year was the ACC championship. We finished 6th. By the time I drove down to Pinehurst we were already out of contention the first day. Nobody cared. And I don't mean that as disrespect to the league, but our standard is how do you do in the postseason in the NCAA, you know. So to me, we have to be in a conference that gives us the best chance monetarily to do that, right? So that's one. And I also think that our women's golf team plays in Hawaii. Our men's golf team plays in Hawaii every year. Our softball and volleyball teams go play in Idaho and Wyoming and wherever. So the idea that once every other year, we're going to go to the Bay to play Stanford and Cal, I don't get too caught up in all that. Now, I do think if you're Stanford and Cal, and if you're UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon, and you've got to go multiple times to play, I personally think that's a bigger deal for them. I also think that's why you pick the number of years, 3, 5, 7, 10, whatever it is. I think there's going to be football, and maybe the 2 basketballs, and then there's going to be everything else. And the everything else is going to go back to conference regionality. I don't know if that's a word. I just made it up. I think it's going to go back to, that's what I just personally think is going to happen. Because I don't think it's feasible for kids at Oregon who are going to traipse across the country 4 or 5 times a year to play. I just don't think I think smarter people are going to realize that's probably not a good thing to do. So the second credit, the first is I want to win national. The second to me is I want to be in the same conference as Duke. I really don't care about being in the same conference as the other school down the road. I don't. I just don't. And I know, maybe that's easy for me to say because I'm not a native North Carolinian. I didn't go to school here. No. But you're right.
You're right. You're right.
I'm driving people out the door.
All right, 2 questions.
Yes, sir.
Back to basketball. Number 1, is Seth Trimble the best defensive player we've had since Dudley Bradley? And number 2, how good is Elliot Enough?
So, in order, I think George Lynch and Leakey and Raymond Felton and Jack Emanuel would probably put themselves in that same conversation. I think Seth's really good defensively. I know, because I had a conversation with Hubert yesterday, I said, was it my eyes or was Seth? He goes, Seth changed the game. Yes. Seth changed the game against Radford. He didn't. I think he scored 1 point. He was 1 for 2 from 3 for line. He scored 1 point, and Hubert said he probably was the most important player in that game because in that stretch in the first half, when they were all looking at each other going, oh my God, I can't believe Radford scored 8 straight points and it's tied, and now we're behind, and oh my God, he was panicking. Seth went in and shut the kid down and got us. I thought he changed the narrative of that game. He scored 1 point. Now he needs to contribute more on the offensive end. And some of that I think is just confidence. He got into the lane the other day and he had a 10-footer. Take it. Take it. If you're wide open in the lane, 10 feet from the hoop, and you're a talented player like Seth is, take it. Because in practice he takes it and he makes it. And he just needs to make a couple in games, and then you'll start to see a relaxed. I don't think he's very relaxed when he plays offensively right now, but he can really get after it. Elliott is a special talent, but you got to remember too, he didn't play his senior year of high school. I mean, Armando's like 32. And so there's a big age gap, right? And he's got to get better. But Marcus Page, who was a pretty good basketball player at Carolina, and Marcus is a really cerebral kind of player in the way he looks at playing. And I asked Marcus in the preseason, and I said something about, you know, Elliott and offense, and he goes, oh, I would love to play with him. I said, well, that's a pretty high compliment. He goes, oh, he's a guy, there are certain guards who get you the ball where you want it, the way you want it, and understand that you may want it better, different way than you want it. You may want it chin high, and you may want it here. And he said, Elliott just makes everybody around him better. And the veteran guys, Armando has talked about that, about how Elliott he sees things different. And I think that's where offensively, like, we really haven't had a whole lot of production out of the three, the small forward position for the last 4 years. And Leakey's a fantastic defensive player, great leader, but he didn't score much. And it's been since Cameron Johnson where we got scoring, 2019, where we got a lot of scoring at the three. And this is at a school with Walter Davis and Jerry Stackhouse and Harrison Barnes and Justin Jackson and etc. And so I think Harrison, not only is Harrison more of an offensive threat, but I think Elliott will get the ball to guys like Harrison and Cormac and RJ and Paxson for better shots. So I just think in general, I think we're going to get more out of the perimeter. And then what happens when we get the ball, when we get scoring out of the perimeter, is Armando gets more effective. Because if you think of, and I think I said this when we talked last year, the difference between Armando last year versus 2 years ago was Brady. Because Brady played the 4, and instead of Brady parking his butt down on the block, which we did at the beginning of the 21-22 season, and Brady wasn't very comfortable scoring in the post. And so finally, about January 1st, Hubert started just running him to the corner. And it was just go to the corner, and not only can he make threes, but it opened all this space in the paint for Armando and for RJ and Caleb to drive to the basket. And last year, that space wasn't there because Hubert showed me a tape one time that we had 3 offensive players that they weren't guarding. Their defensive players were in the paint. So there was nowhere for Armando to go. And Armando is not Shaq. Armando's not getting the ball, drop stepping, and just dunking over 6 people. He just isn't. So he needs that space to move and roll and all that. And before you throw me off the stage, your guest, Miss Lydia. Lydia did more in the last 2 years to help with the Carolina Basketball Museum by giving me great ideas and telling me when things were twisted off thing or just ideas. She was such a sweetheart to work with and did so much to help the Carolina Basketball Museum. So I meant to say that. Sorry. Yes.
Yes.
You can't go to the museum without a friendly welcome from Bob. So thank you.